Okay, hello and welcome everyone to our webinar Wednesday in recognition of National Cancer Research Month. Just as a reminder, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. We are streaming this live to Facebook and it will be recorded and shared to our YouTube page as well. Throughout today's presentation, for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, if any questions come up, feel free to type them in the chat box and we will make sure that we address them. For those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, you can use the comments feature to ask any questions that you may have throughout today's presentations. The Webinar Wednesday series is part of our Healthy You virtual education programming brought to you by the University of Chicago Comprehensive Cancer Center.
Role PhDs like myself, other patients, can play in forming cancer communities and accelerating research. I don't know how much background knowledge you all have in lung cancer, but if it's anything like mine when I was first diagnosed, you might think that all lung cancers are pretty much the same. This really isn't the case, however, and much has been learned about the different molecular types of lung cancer over the years. Adenocarcinoma, which is the type I have, makes up about 40% of all lung cancer diagnoses and is a subtype of non-small cell lung cancer that is biomarker driven. For a long time, we only knew about one biomarker called KRAS, but did not have any specific treatments. Then in 2004, EGFR was discovered and precision medicine treatments started to be developed to target cancer cells that were growing due to changes in this EGFR biomarker called mutations. Now we have a much more comprehensive knowledge of the molecular determinants of adenocarcinoma, as you can see from the pie chart on the right. All these different biomarkers can mean different specific treatments, precision medicine treatments that directly target the genomic alterations that cause cancer. Oops, why can I not go to my next slide? Wait a second.
Is there an arrow?
There we go. I got it. Okay, sorry about that. So this is an important chart. As therapies for lung cancer have improved, people have started to be able to live better and longer with lung cancer, and as a result, to be able to advocate for themselves and others. So in the past 5 years, advocates have formed patient groups for many of the biomarker-driven cancers on the pie chart you saw on the slide before this one. These groups are usually patient-run and determine their own agendas, focusing on what they feel are unmet needs in their specific subset of lung cancer. I don't know. Oh, there we go. I'll get the hang of this in a couple of minutes, hopefully before the end. So all these different patient groups have different, specific focuses, but they all have in common what they offer patients. They offer patients hope, support, education, empowerment, and connections. Many people who join these groups have never met other people living with lung cancer in person, let alone a tribe of people who share their specific type of lung cancer. Many of the groups, although not all, participate in patient-driven research. This is really important because as patients, we have critical information that we can share and we have a unique perspective. Patient-driven research can help scientists learn about disease biology, develop and test new treatments, identify best practices for patient care, generate ideas for new studies, and support regulatory approvals, among other things. The EGFR Resistors was one of the earlier lung cancer patient groups to form. We weren't the first, though. That honor belongs to the ROS1ers for ROS1 lung cancer. We founded the EGFR Resistors lung cancer patient group in August of 2017, so almost 4 years ago now. We felt that there was a need for a community of patients and caregivers to share knowledge, provide support, and collect patient data with the overall goal of improving outcomes for EGFR positive lung cancer. We have a closed Facebook group that our members use to communicate with each other, and we communicate with the larger EGFR community through our website, our Twitter and Instagram handles, and our monthly newsletter. If you're not following us on social media, please feel free to do so, and you can sign up for our monthly newsletter via our website. There we go. Since our initial formation, we have had a huge amount of growth. We, started with our 7, members, and now we have over 2,700 members of the EGFR Resistors globally, with patients and caregivers from more than 75 different countries. Most of our members are patients, about 85%, and the rest are caregivers. Our community is highly motivated and participates in many advocacy, educational, and fundraising opportunities. Many of our members have experienced resistance, which drives our urgency to accelerate research. We all recognize how critically important research is to extending and improving our lives. We felt that when we first created our group, it was critically important to define what our purpose and our mission was, so that we would make sure that we spent all our collective time on efforts and projects that fit this purpose and not be distracted. So as a result, we created a goal, a vision, and a mission statement. And we refer back to these frequently to make sure we're staying true to what we really want to accomplish. Our goal is to improve outcomes for all of those with EGFR positive lung cancer by accelerating research. Our vision is to change EGFR positive lung cancer into a manageable chronic disease similar to other diseases. And we're not there yet, but we hope that this is something that can be accomplished in the not too far future. And our mission is to continue to raise awareness of EGFR positive lung cancer and to address critical gaps in the clinic and in research. We've been working towards this mission since we were founded, and we'll discuss some of our efforts in the rest of this presentation. Oops. Okay, there we go. We aim to improve outcomes for our disease with 4 main methods. One is supporting patients and caregivers through our closed Facebook group that I mentioned before. And the reason this is a closed group to just patients and caregivers is because we want them to be able to freely share their concerns with confidentiality. Our second way is increasing awareness and education for our members. And we do this in a number of ways, including providing information and firsthand experiences with treatments and trials, giving tips for communicating with healthcare teams, sharing information about symptoms and side effect management, and helping with asking the right questions. All of this assistance we found builds confidence for many patients to take charge of their care and advocate for themselves. And many of them end up becoming lung cancer advocates and advocating for others as well. Third is improving access to effective diagnosis and treatment, which is critically important. We share information about getting second opinions, having biomarker testing, having repeat biopsies upon progression. We suggest resources to help with cost and insurance coverage issues, and share information about clinical trials. So, things are changing so fast in lung cancer with lots of new developments. And depending on whether, receiving treatment, patients and caregivers often need to be the ones to bring information about the latest in testing and treatment to their doctors. Last but not least is accelerating and funding research. Even though the EGFR mutation was the first targetable mutation discovered in lung cancer, recent work has not advanced treatment for EGFR as much as we believe is necessary. We're alive today because of research, and we understand the importance of continued research for, all the patients like us. I'm going to go into a little more detail about our research priorities. As I mentioned before, our mission is to understand the unmet needs of our community. But in order to do this, we focus really on relationship development and communication with all the stakeholders in the lung cancer community in order to drive important research questions. We've strategically identified projects to address these questions and answer genuine unmet patient needs. And in order to accomplish this work, since we're not a 501c3 ourselves, we've created research partnerships with advocacy organizations and industry to help with education and with funding for our projects. And I'll talk about those a little bit more soon. And we are, not connected or tied to any specific organization. We're open and interested in working with any organizations in the lung cancer community for projects who share our purposes and our priorities. Here are some of the research collaborations we've been part of so far. So as you can see, we've partnered with major lung cancer advocacy groups such as GO2 and Longevity. We've partnered with industry. AstraZeneca is the only one up there, but there have been other industry partners. And we've had a very successful partnership with a group called CEC Oncology. I'm going to talk about the CEC Oncology one kind of quickly because without CEC Oncology, we really would not be where we are today. First of all, to back up, CEC is a company that focuses on continuing education for doctors, nurses, and other medical practitioners. When we launched the EGFR Resistors, the president and owner of CEC Oncology reached out to us because we share a common interest in EGFR positive lung cancer. So in 2018, CEC helped us secure a grant to hold a think tank of EGFR thought leaders to discuss the gaps in practice and research for EGFR lung cancer and way to target these gaps. This was really important for us, and we had a number of prominent oncologists in attendance, and it really helped us zero in on our group's priorities. Since that think tank, we have continued to work with CEC Oncology and include our perspectives in some symposiums that we've worked with them jointly, various different events that have occurred at ASCO, well, virtually at ASCO, and a number of other educational projects. We're actually working on one right now that's a 3-part webinar on progression and resistance. One of the ideas that came out of the think tank that I had mentioned before that we had is the idea of having an EGFR Resistors Research Summit. And we've had 2 of them so far, one live in 2019 and another one virtual in 2020. And we actually just got the approval for one in 2021, this coming November. And these really were created to encourage young investigators to continue research work in EGFR positive lung cancer and collaborate early on in their years. Again, CEC Oncology has partnered with us for these and helped us secure grant funding, which has been very helpful for us. The true benefit of these summits, even more than the research that the young investigators present, is the development of these collaborative relationships between the investigators and the mentored judges who are knowledge leaders in the field. We, divide the young investigators up into squads to work in small groups with these well-known experts, and they also receive a lot of mentorship on topics like grant writing, publishing, clinical trials, and other areas. And it really gets them excited about, staying with work in lung cancer. I'm going to just mention a little bit about our partnerships that we've done with Longevity. We recently partnered with Longevity on a research study called Project Priority, standing for Patient-Reported Initiative on Resistance, Incidence, and Treatment Study. And the reason this is such a kind of different type of study is that because it's a patient-funded and patient-driven research partnership. We created a comprehensive 130-question survey, and our objectives were to understand the needs of the EGFR positive lung cancer community, identify areas for improvement in diagnosis and treatment, and give voice to patient concerns about a lot of topics, including risk factors, treatments, and side effect management. It ended up being one of the largest studies of its kind, probably the largest in about EGFR lung cancer patients, because we were able to reach, across the country, internationally, and across institutions, which, one individual researcher usually cannot do. And we found tons of really important and interesting findings. Here's just a quick snapshot. I'm not going to, go into all of these, but some of these, were quite different from what were expected by many oncologists, such as the high level of diagnosed clinical depression and the fact that there are still many patients in the US who aren't receiving the FDA-approved standard of care as their first-line treatment for EGFR positive lung cancer. So we've had the privilege of presenting results at numerous oncology conferences, and we believe that it's really been helpful in advancing the knowledge of what patients are going through. This slide also shows something, really important that came out of Project Priority. There's a big difference between side effect profiles that are put together and, determined through a trial and those that are seen in the real world. And if you look at this slide on the left, the green columns show side effect profiles in a clinical trial. On the right, you see the side effect profiles in the real world participants who were part of Project Priority. And there's huge differences. I mean, in the trial, only 21% of people reported fatigue, for example, but in real life, 78% of people did. And while, there we go. And, it's really not surprising that the side effects in trials vary greatly from those reported in the real world. But this shows why patient-reported information, like in Project Priority, is so important. You know, clinical trials exclude many real-world patients, those who don't have access to the clinical trials, those who have brain mets, prior cancer, poor performance. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why clinical trial results might not really capture the impact on the community. So by doing this study, we really felt that we were able to show how important real-world data is and how necessary it is to complement the existing clinical trial and research data that exists. Oops. Bear with me one second. I am having a lot of slide issues today. I apologize. Okay. Real quickly, I'm going to talk about one other thing that we have going on in research, and then I'm going to end because I don't want to take up too much time. And I'm going to mention this new research partnership that we just announced, where we again are working with Longevity Foundation. We basically, once we completed Project Priority, we had a great idea about what our community needed. So we worked with Longevity to issue an RFP, a request for proposals for an EGFR positive lung cancer research award program. And we ended up funding two-year research projects for a total of $400,000 that we hope will have significant impact on the patients in our community. And all this money was raised directly through our EGFR Resistors patient community. Here's a little bit of information about the projects that we are funding. We chose these projects directly. A team of EGFR Resistors members chose these projects directly with some assistance and advice from Longevity and knowledge leaders in the EGFR community, but they were our final decision. I mean, the patients decided, made the final decision about the projects that were most important. And they are investigating issues related to treatment resistance, which, as I mentioned earlier, is something that's experienced by pretty much everyone in our community at some point. Lastly, before I end today, I'd just like to review what we feel to be the most important measurements of successful patient researcher partnerships. These partnerships should include patients from the start, every step of the way. They should address questions that are meaningful to patients and develop patient-centered measurements and accommodate patients' clinical realities. They should leverage social media and patient groups and share progress with participants frequently. Finally, they should make results rapidly and freely available. In the work that we've been doing with the EGFR resistors, we have tried very, very hard to make sure that all of our partnerships have included all of these steps. Of course, we learn more with every project that we do. And, as we, move on further from our, original founding, but, having this little arrow that shows us what we are trying to accomplish keeps us focused and keeps us, motivated to continue to work and advocate for improved outcomes for our community. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be happy to answer any questions later on.
Great. Thank you so much, Ivy. A lot of great information there. And we will definitely be sharing links for people to follow EGFR resistors across social media and any other resources that you want to share. So thank you again for all that great information. I'm going to throw it to Kimberly Richardson now. So let's see. Kimberly, I think you should be able to share your screen. Great, we can see that.
All right, great. Hi, guys. This is Kimberly Richardson. I'm here, of course, from Chicago. And my conversation today is really going to be about how patients go from being survivors to actual patient advocates, and that we need to think very carefully about how patients can do more than just share their story. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that I've actually been able to do at the Cancer Center at UIC. So this is the content of my presentation. Of course, I'm going to share a bit of my own experience about my cancer diagnosis, and then how that diagnosis actually gave me this connection to patient advocacy, and then discuss some of the needs for meaningful collaborations between survivors and scientists. And I think I'm going to make those distinctions as I go along. So this is my cancer diagnosis. It all began when I was 50 years old. I was training for the Chicago Marathon and started feeling a lot of different weird symptoms, largely real intense fatigue. Ended up going to my primary. We did a lot of different tests. Everything was coming back fine until we got to that vaginal ultrasound. And it was, what was discovered on that vaginal ultrasound were ovarian cysts. And that's what I was talked about and told that was going to be removed through this surgery. I had signed a full disclosure for if there was cancer that was found during surgery, that we would do this full hysterectomy. What happened on the table was I was diagnosed on the table with ovarian cancer, a rare form called granulosa cell tumor. And the first snafu was there was not a full hysterectomy performed. Only my fallopian tubes and ovarian ovaries, my ovaries and fallopian tubes were removed. I do want to stress here that second picture is of me and my oncology nurse, Amanda. I took this picture and wanted to make sure everybody could see it, because Amanda literally saved my emotional life through treatment. My relationship with my oncologist started off really rocky. As I just mentioned to you, met her on the table. She was the gynecological oncologist on call, and she performed all of the surgery. What ended up happening after follow-up was I came to my first follow-up visit, and I met with the PA, the physician's assistant. And as soon as I sat down, she said, "Good news, Kimberly, it looks very possible you won't have to do chemo. Your inhibin B levels reduced from 535 to 0. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I was glad to know I wasn't going to have to do chemotherapy. And then she walked out the room, and the gynecological oncologist walks in, sits down and says, "Let's start discussing scheduling your chemotherapy treatments." I'm like, wait, what? And so I mentioned that first to let you know that there is always these ways of patient communication where we drop the ball, where a diagnosis and how it is communicated to a patient should run through everybody on the health team, right? The PA shouldn't have walked in and said, "You're not going to have to do chemo," and then the oncologist walks in and says, "Let's schedule your treatment." It got worse from there, quite honestly. We just didn't communicate well. I was somewhat, and still I am, a type A type person. I ran a non-for-profit. I was an adjunct professor. I always want to know the bottom line. And unfortunately, with ovarian cancer, there, at the time in 2013, when I was diagnosed, wasn't a lot of information out there about granulosa cell tumor. And so as I every visit would come right before these infusions to meet with this oncologist and ask different questions and literally get shot down. And I'll give you a great example. I asked the question of, "I just don't understand how I got ovarian cancer. There's no family history of ovarian cancer in my family. Can you explain to me how this happened to me?" With tears in my eyes, I asked this question. She looked up from her computer and just said, shrugged her shoulders and said, "I guess you're just unlucky." And so as I say that to you, and I know there's some people out there gasping at that, trust me when I tell you, every one of those visits prior to treatment got worse and worse and worse. And I would come to those infusions with bloodshot eyes from crying. And Amanda, one day, leaned in and talked directly into my ear and said, I'm going to help you find a new oncologist. And that changed everything fundamentally for me, right? So I did want to make sure everybody saw my wonderful little picture over there in the corner. Then in fact, I did do the Chicago Marathon 2 years later. And after that, 3 weeks after the Chicago Marathon, I then completed the Chicago Ultra, which is about a 50K race. That is one of my greatest accomplishments. And so I want to set the stage for why I am involved in patient advocacy, because despite what I did not know at the time about granulosa cell ovarian cancer, I don't ever want another patient to go through that kind of tense communication with an oncologist. I think there needs to be some equity in our learning and our understanding of our cancer disease. And so this is why I advocate. You all have always seen these infographics everywhere. It says that ovarian cancer occurs in 1 in 75 women, and I am that 1 in 75. And so I wanted to start here with making sure that everybody understood that patient advocacy is really not a new construct. I'm going to read this quote. Activists in the plague years invented modern patient advocacy by demanding and then securing a meaningful role for people afflicted with a disease in all areas of the research process. To do this, they first had to familiarize themselves with the state of the science. While they may not have been able to conduct the research themselves, their unique perspective as the intended recipient of any breakthroughs allowed them to envision streamlined methods. And so this is, again, one of the reasons why I think when we finish treatment, we're often sort of in this limbo place. Like, you know, you've been cared for so many months during treatment, you've been interacting with the healthcare professionals. And then when that ringing of the bell or whatever symbolic thing you do that says treatment is over, you're on your own. They're expecting you to go back to your life, create a new normal of your life. And most people want to have some way to have a conversation about their experience. And so what I did, like everybody else, I got involved in awareness advocacy. I wore the teal t-shirts. I went to events and spoke and talked about my story, but I found my way to the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance and began to be an advocate leader. And here is where what we call policy advocacy, right? Where survivors go share their story with lawmakers. And what we're essentially doing is sharing that story in hopes of being able to increase funding for our particular cancer research. And so you see me here with Danny Davis. I had known him prior to my cancer diagnosis, so it was a bit odd to then go into his office after years of speaking to him about community economic development, and now to have to tell him and share something so personal about me and say, I'm here wearing a totally different hat. I'm here because I've been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And he has been a champion of all that we've done in ovarian cancer for the state of Illinois. On that last slide to the right, this one of my proudest accomplishments was I actually created the resolution in the state legislature to form a gynecological commission so that we could begin to look at the aspects around gynecological cancer in the state of Illinois and find ways to sort of redistribute some funding for cancer research, because in Illinois, we have issues of high mortality, high diagnosis around cervical cancer for African Americans, for uterine cancer in African Americans, for Latin American women in cervical cancer. And of course, our numbers in ovarian cancer are still very startling because we don't have a diagnostic. So we don't have a mammogram, right? So most of everyone who is diagnosed with ovarian cancer, regardless of subtype, is diagnosed somewhere around late stage 3 or 4. And without that diagnostic, right, we're going to have more and more women, regardless of age, regardless of race, being diagnosed with ovarian cancer and not having a chance to live through these treatments. And so I got an opportunity to start doing some work at the University of Illinois Cancer Center. I actually met at the time our executive director, Robert Wynn, in Atlanta, in New Orleans at an AACR meeting. And he invited me to come back and be a part of the patient brigade because they didn't have an ovarian cancer patient advocate. And one of the first things I was able to do was to organize an event where we would come to the cancer biology lab. We first met with Dr. Kieski, who is now our executive, our director of the Cancer Center. And he came to the patient brigade and he said, this is what I do in my cancer biology lab. Now the patient brigade, again, if I didn't mention it, is a group of cancer survivors across all cancer types. And we serve sort of as an ambassador for the Illinois Cancer Center. And so he gave us an invitation and said, come on by and see our cancer lab, right? And so, yeah, we thought that would be very interesting. Cancer survivors and researchers rarely get to meet one another in person, but yet the end result is always the work of advancing cancer research and helping us live our lives a little bit longer. One of the other projects that I'm involved with the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance is a program called Survivors Teaching Students. Again, opportunities for us to share our stories with medical students. And this is some pictures of the students that I've spoken in front of at the University of Illinois. We do it all across Illinois with Northwestern, U of C, Loyola, all the different teaching hospitals across the city of Chicago. These are just these ways for patient advocates to get beyond telling their stories to doing something and having more meaningful impact on the actual healthcare provider. These slides are more germane and personal to me because I was able to meet with Dr. Joanna Burdett, who is actually the person who has her hands like this. And these pictures are a group of our survivors teaching students patient advocates. And I said, it's important that they also get that opportunity to come to a lab and see the work that's being done by these wonderful researchers. And what we were able to do was like share a meal, but more importantly, what we were able to do was sit around a table and share our stories, because the researchers have stories too. They have a reason for why they do the work that they do. And most times it's connected to some female, whether it's a grandmother or a mother or a sister who was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Some of the things that I've been able to do at the University of Illinois as their research advocate have led to these things I call questions, conversations, and events. When I first got there and started dealing with the patient brigade and started asking these questions around clinical trials, for example, the question was, why are minorities not participating in clinical trials? That's not a new question. We've been going over that since COVID, right? But what we thought was the answer was, of course, what you're hearing in mainstream media. It's this mistrust, right? That lends itself back to the Tuskegee experiment and the experiments that were done on Henrietta Lacks. And so we decided to meet with this young lady that's on the right-hand side of this screen. Her name is Rhea Blakey, and she is the communications person and liaison to the FDA's Center for oncology and Oncology Center of Excellence. And so we asked her, what if we would have a conversation around inviting oncologists from FDA, oncologists that are major here to the city, those some pharmaceutical folks, and we get them all in one room just with community residents, right? And ask the question so everybody could hear the same responses. And resoundingly, what we found by doing this event, this is the actual event where you can see the numbers of people that were in the audience. I'm sure you're going to see a familiar face down there at the corner, Dr. Lee. What we found when we talked to regular people in the community was that there is no real mistrust per se. They understand Tuskegee's experiment. They understand Henrietta Lacks. But the issue is that they truly did understand precision medicine. When we asked them questions around, would you participate in clinical trials? Yes, if I was asked, would you word of mouth tell family and friends to participate? And they're like, yeah. But the real dynamic, of course, was there are some people in that audience that would say, yeah, but I don't really trust researchers, and you try to use you as guinea pigs. And what was really encouraging was to not have to hear from the researchers and expect a response from them, but that members from the audience began to chat with one another and say, but hey, the things that are on our shelves today, the drugs that we take and buy from CVS came from a trial. And if we don't participate, we don't know how those drugs affects our bodies. And so we walked away with one narrative about mistrust and realized that we really need to start focusing and thinking more clearly about how to engage Black and Brown people in their education of clinical trials, and really ask them, how do you want to participate in a clinical trial? So as a patient advocate, being able to sit in those two spaces for me, first as a patient advocate, second as a Black cancer survivor, and someone who's interested in research, how do we bring these people around the table and ask the simple questions? And what we're finding more often than not, that's the missing link for researchers. They tend to sort of look at a research design and not put into effect patient engagement. And so this is what led me to research advocacy, asking these kinds of questions. And together with the University of Chicago, last year, we did a gynecological researcher survivor summit. And this literally came to be because I met Dr. Lee at an ovarian cancer conference. I approached her with this idea and she said, sure, let's pull this summit together. And so this summit really focused on the survivors as the audience, where we sat there with researchers and asked questions. You can see as those pictures, everybody in that audience were engaging one another around how well can we collaborate? What is it going to take for researchers to explain their research in easy to understand language? And then what is it going to take for us to learn? What types of mechanisms is it going to take for us to learn and have that shared language so we can have these kinds of conversations? So I quickly want to just show you where I've gone from from my diagnosis in 2013 to the type of work I do as a patient advocate. My biggest and most proud accomplishment now is that I'm one of two patient advocates that is a part of the NCI Moonshot Impact Program, where we're looking specifically at health management apps and wearables. And of course, my work continues with the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance. I started out as an advocate leader, and now I sit on their I represent them on NCI's steering committee, and I do a lot of DoD pre-reviewing of grant applications. I sit on OCRA's Health Disparities Task Force. Of course, that's something that continues to be an issue for me, is how well we structure patient advocacy and patient engagement around clinical trials. I am one of the co-chairs of our patient advocacy committee for the Society for Integrative Oncology, something that is also very warm to my heart, to think about all these other types of modalities, like the way we eat, how effective sleep is for cancer research, acupuncture, and I sit on that patient advocacy co-chair. I am now the chair of the survivorship committee for the Illinois Cancer Partnership. And that's fascinating work to me now, because I get to not only do the work I've been doing with policy and bring my research advocacy experience to how we're going to drive our comprehensive cancer plan in the state of Illinois, and really look at research and how funding is distributed to some of our leading cancer types. And the coolest part for me now is that I actually get an opportunity to give other patient advocates a voice in print. I now sit on the editorial board of the Journal of Health Design, and have co-created a educational course to teach patient advocates how to submit a journal article. Well, we all went through COVID. It didn't stop advocacy. And unfortunately for me, it didn't stop a new cancer diagnosis. I've now been diagnosed with triple positive breast cancer. I'm through the chemo and the radiation, and I'm now in my Herceptin and aromatase inhibitor phase. But I'll tell you, this is the difference. This time around, I wasn't a passive participant in my treatment. I wasn't asking questions, I knew the questions. And if I didn't know the questions, I had colleagues that I could ask. And that's the difference, right? From how we're diagnosed to how we talk about our treatment, how we ask the correct questions of our oncologists, how we can even get into a conversation with researchers, is we definitely need to have that knowledge, right? And so I'll give a great example. Before, with my ovarian cancer diagnosis, I didn't know what to ask. I didn't know what debulking meant. I didn't really, honestly, to be honest with you, I didn't really know the difference between the diagnosis and the prognosis. But this time around, I was able to go on PubMed. Last time around, didn't even know PubMed existed. Was able to go on PubMed, research existing trials that were occurring around radiation treatments, and then go to my radiation oncologist armed with that information and say, I'm advocating for myself. I do not want to do 33 consecutive treatments. I've seen this trial. It's the Florence trial. I need you to read it. It's around accelerated partial breast radiation. And I literally was able to convince him that I was a candidate for that type of radiation treatment. It reduced my time of 33 consecutive treatments to 5 in 1 week. And so I accredit my experience as a research advocate in my ability to advocate for my own personal treatment. So here we are, and this is the program that I've been asked to really talk about. All these experiences have helped me to shape why I'm doing what's called the Survivors Advising Scientists educational program. I got an opportunity as an Elevate survivor. I submitted this plan to the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship, and they wrapped themselves around me and gave me strategic planning, technical assistance advice for about 4 months as I developed this program. And basically, these are training modules. The whole concept of these training modules is we are trying to create a bidirectional education platform that connects young investigators with cancer patients, survivors, research advocates, and allies to increase scientific literacy and engagement across the communities. So these are the first 17 modules that we have been able to do. And we really wanted to start very, very simply. If we can't get a patient as a survivor to understand what they are seeing when they get that scholarship to go to a scientific conference, and when they sit in those sessions and they look at research being discussed, and they don't really know what's going on. So what these modules help the average patient and caregivers do is understand, what is a scientific hypothesis? What is that? Why is this the whole thing that drives cancer research? And so you can see that these are some of the modules that we've done. And our whole concept around the bidirectional workflow, which is really cool. The students, the MD, PhD students, create the first draft of the module. Those modules are then sent to patient advocates nationwide. The patient advocates review it for easy. Is it easy to understand? Everything about the module, right? They're usually just done on PowerPoint, and it's a audio presentation that overlaps it. And that's where the patient advocate comes in. I don't understand this term. Can you explain it differently? And they give them written feedback. The cool part about the bidirectional workflow is that the MD, PhD students, they get the opportunity to address those questions and say, I understand why you think this might be a little bit more of a difficult concept, but here are the constraints that I have, because these are the tenets of basic scientific inquiry that we can't bend, we can't move around, but I can say it differently. I can explain it differently. And so what then begins to happen for both the patients that are involved in the process of the development of these modules is they begin to learn scientific inquiry, and our students, they get to be able to talk to varying populations of people in easy to understand language. If they can talk to patient advocates, they can then talk to journalists about their research. They can go to Capitol Hill and speak on the importance of their work. Peer-to-peer, you know, you guys got that. I mean, that's just the way they're supposed to talk to one another at conferences and whatever. But outside of that conference environment, patients want to understand the breakthrough research. And if you're using a lot of scientific jargon, you're going to lose a lot of people. And so this is the main reason why I decided to create these modules so that they're both shared with scientists and advocates in a meaningful way. So these are my team. We have done podcasts. We've been on Twitter chats. And the most important accomplishment of our work thus far is that we created a scientific poster at the University of Illinois Gary Crew Research Symposium, and we won our category for our work in cancer prevention. So I'm really excited to see that what I was just an idea that I had as a patient advocate has been supported by researchers at both U of C as well as U of I. And they're saying, yes, what we think you're doing is important work. Now, just to be expedient, we're also starting to see that NCI and NIH are making eligibility requirements around patient advocate participation. And it's no longer going to be an opportunity for researchers to just write a application or write up a grant, and it doesn't even show any real level of participation from patient advocates. So we're doing some new modules. These new modules will be done by cancer type. We'll be talking about different levels of cancer treatment. Of course, as I said, one of my favorite things to talk about will be oncology. And we'll also be adding more modules that are easy to understand around palliative care. So here's my PSA as a cancer patient to our research population. You got to remember the cancer patients in every aspect of your job. If you're in a cancer center, it matters how the receptionist treats the cancer patient all the way up to the researcher. And please don't let the patient advocate fool you. Don't let that title fool you. Many of us were well accomplished human beings before our diagnosis. And when we get involved in patient advocacy, we take this extremely seriously. And the last little pet peeve is please stop asking us to do last minute checkoffs on your on any of your research designs, because we do have the right to say no. I think the one of the most important places where if you're uncertain about where patient advocates land, you definitely heard some great work that Ivy is doing. But me personally, I've been involved at the University of Illinois' gynecological design team. I work on a lot of the different working groups within cancer biology. I'm still waiting at UIC to get involved in their tumor board, but I do get an opportunity to add my voice to education and training curriculums. And I am also being asked on many occasions to do what's now being considered patient design studios, where we actually get involved in the trial design, or whether it's going to be an app or wearable or any kind of health management type of research design. We are now being asked before it's submitted, what do you think? And I find this to be so incredibly rewarding work. And of course, where we always tend to fit in is in government task force, where patient advocates are asked to do grant reviews and to influence policy change. So I leave you with these 3 questions, and hopefully we can have a rich discussion in the chat, or just have those questions in the chat later for Aaliyah and team to sort of really think about. We need to think about all of our implicit biases. This is so incredibly important if we're going to move together in a collaborative fashion. Researchers, I mean, what do you believe are the skills that a patient advocate needs in order to collaborate with you on a research project? We haven't been doing it. So what's the hang up? We all have some sort of thing about, well, we don't think we need to work with patients. But now most of the grants are requiring you to do a collaborative piece of that work with patient advocates. What skills do you think we need to have in order to collaborate with you? And advocates, of course, as survivors, we think, oh, I'm not a scientist. I don't understand all of this. I don't want to do research advocacy. If you were asked to collaborate at the start of a research design, what skills do you think you need to participate? Trust me when I tell you, your story is enough. But what are the things outside of our modules, for example, that would teach you about basic scientific inquiry? What else do you think you need as a skill? And I asked this question to both researchers and advocates. What is a meaningful collaborative effort? Is it creating a research design? Is it thinking through patient engagement for a study? Is it a journal article, right? It's certainly not asking me 12 hours before your grant is due to read your abstract. That's not meaningful collaboration. And I think a lot of us agree. So I thank you for your time today. I want to do a shout out for our 2nd annual Chicago Gynecological Cancer Research Survivor Summit. It's going to be held in conjunction with the University of Illinois at Chicago, as well as U of C, again with Dr. Lee at the helm. And we are co-leading this event. And it's going to be Saturday, May 22nd at 9 a.m. So I'm encouraging you, if you're looking for the way these collaborations come together, the simplicity of it, and how you can duplicate it at your cancer centers, please just reach out to me, and we'll help you walk through all of these kinds of initiatives that we've done in the past. Thank you for your time. And back to you, Leah.
Great. Thank you so much, Kimberly. That was, I loved hearing your story and your journey. That was so great. Such great information from both of our speakers today. I just do want to note we are a little over time, which is fine. I think we can still, so for those of you who need to jump off, we certainly understand that it is 1:36 right now. But I do want to just field a couple questions for our speakers, because the work that you do is so important. And everyone on this webinar, it's a wide range of people, right? We've got people who are clinicians, or they work in the cancer research space already. We've got people who are cancer survivors. We've got people who are medical students. We've got people who are like, I'm just kind of interested, right? I'm just a community member and I'm interested in cancer in general, and I just want to learn. So we have a lot of different roles already on this webinar, and I guess my question to each of you is, if I'm just a person who maybe is not as involved in cancer day to day, right? If I'm not working in the space, or maybe I'm not a cancer survivor, I'm just a sort of average person who's looking to get involved in cancer research advocacy. Like, what's my first step? Where do I go to start?
Abby, would you like to start?
Yeah, I mean, that's that's a really good question. I would say probably the first thing to do in order to get started is maybe to just do a little bit of research and maybe connect to one of, I mean, if you're, looking at a specific, type of cancer, connect to one of the large advocacy groups that are already out there, and look at some of the stuff that's on their website and familiarize yourself with some of the issues. And there's usually events posted in terms of things you can go to. They may be virtual right now or not, but just ways to kind of get started and meet some members of the community, kind of find out what the critical needs really are, and then just kind of think about what's needed out there in advocacy and what skills you have or would be interested in providing. Because as you can tell from like what Kimberly and I have been talking about, there are just so many different ways that you can advocate and so many different ways that you can help. And if you're interested in getting involved, you want to find something that suits your style and your life. Like, some people might be more interested in speaking, some people might be more interested in writing, some people are more interested in getting involved in political advocacy. There's so many different ways you can get involved, and I would just advise like kind of researching that a little bit and figuring out what all the options are, and taking that time, and then seeing what you might most want to do.
I echo all of that. So, Aaliyah, you can go to your next question.
Yeah, that was a comprehensive answer. That was great.
It was.
Totally agree with all that. And so, speaking from the patient perspective, when you think about what your role is as a patient in research advocacy, and a lot of what comes to mind is telling your story. What is your story? And so if I'm a cancer survivor, or what do you think is the most compelling aspects of sharing someone's story? Like, what should a survivor know when it comes to sharing their story, and how it can be utilized to move cancer research?
Yeah, I think that there's an art of course, to telling the story, right? That, you can't cram in everything that happened in your story when people are asking to speak for 10 minutes, right? You have to sort of take those themes that have happened throughout your cancer story and try to make those connections, as I hoped I did today, by letting you know that my disconnect between my oncologist is the thing that has driven me toward creating patient communication tools, right? And so I think that's where you can begin to say, well, what aspects of my cancer story then become my advocacy? Because it's just easy. It's really easy to get on a teal t-shirt and climb on a bus and go to Capitol Hill and tell your story for 5 minutes and then hit them with those legislative asks, right? But that's driven by a national advocacy organization. So how does that make you an actual advocate, right? You're advocating on the behalf of an actual organization's legislative asks. How do you branch out and do the type of advocacy that might be of real interest to you? So yeah, you have all these wonderful options to just get involved as part of a national and a non-for-profit type advocacy organization, or you can do the type of work that I've been doing, is sort of independent and thinking through new ways to communicate with patients and researchers. So I think the opportunities are endless. Wouldn't you agree, Ivy?
I really would. There's lots of opportunities out there. Yeah. Just as many, as many. I think anyone could find something that kind of piques their interest if they want to get involved. I really do.
I agree. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Yeah, someone in the chat asked me about if we had survivors teaching students at the University of Michigan. I will just simply say, contact our national organization. Her name is Susan Layton, and she is the person who works out all of the distribution of where STS goes in terms of talking with medical students. I'll put her information in the chat.
That's great, thank you. And that same medical student, she said she didn't have a question, but I'm just going to read her comment out loud here, because I think a lot of us can echo this. So she says, thank you so much to our two wonderful speakers. And she's going to ask her medical school, which is University of Michigan, to see if they have survivors teaching students, because she wants that to be an integral part of their curriculum. And I think that that's just an awesome connection to make there. So so thank you, Tosin, for asking that, and for Kimberly for providing Susan Layton's information about that. So I have just one last question, and it's sort of, again, a lot of what we're talking about here is trying to take those first steps into cancer research advocacy. So what I often find, and I even found this myself, not coming from, when I came to the University of Chicago Cancer Center, I didn't really come from this cancer background, and there was just a lot of, there seemed to be sort of like a barrier, right? I'd go to these research presentations, I go, oh my goodness, what is this? What's going on? There's a lot of jargon that's thrown around, and there seems to just be this really, sometimes difficult to overcome barrier between all the high level cancer research that's going on and someone who doesn't have, a biomedical background, or doesn't have, the education to understand all of it. And so what would be, some resources that if I'm someone who's looking to get involved in cancer research advocacy, but I need to get past that barrier of just understanding it. What are some resources that you think would be good for someone who's looking to get involved, but needs to overcome those educational gaps in some basic cancer research?
I just put in the chat our email address, so that you can get access to those modules. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you can do in the privacy of your own home. When you have to start from a space that is very, very basic about scientific inquiry. You're not going to be able to walk into a conversation on PARP inhibitors and understand what the hell everybody's talking about. There's a thread that leads all the way back to what is a cancer cell, right? And if you can start there and get that kind of background information, and then couple that with, this is how researchers do the research. So they create this hypothesis, they gather this data. This is how this is the methods section of their poster. This is how they present. Then things start to flow for you, because you see a pattern, and you've learned what that pattern is. It's not, you can't learn by doing with cancer research. It's just going to be like, every time you're in a session, right? But if you start with, what is a hypothesis? What is an independent and dependent variable? And that makes sense to you in easy to understand language, so you can move on to, how am I supposed to understand the research? Then you can move from there to, how do I understand research around lung cancer? How do I understand what the particular modalities are for breast cancer, right? But it starts with a very basic understanding of scientific inquiry. So
I
that's
completely.
my
Mhm.
biggest shout out. And you can use our email address to access those modules. Go ahead,
I
Ivy.
completely agree. I did not have a scientific background when I was first, diagnosed whatsoever. My background is I was an English major. I do not have a scientific background. And, there are a lot of good programs out there where as an advocate, you can, sign up and learn more. AACR has a scientist survivor program. Kimberly mentioned that. That's a fantastic program. And, you do get, that basic science, what is a cancer cell type background through that is a really good foundation. That's one of the things that I did early on. And, there's other programs. Research Advocacy Network has a program. Elder Radley runs that one. There's a number of excellent programs out there that you could apply to.
Okay, in the interest of time, I am gonna go ahead and just cut out of Facebook Live. So thank you to all of you who joined us on Facebook Live today. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.